Sometimes, just a few simple words can change an entire life. This is the story of a moment when a wealthy man discovered that true wealth isn't found in money, but in sharing hope, compassion, and kindness. Let's begin this heart-touching story. On Christmas Eve, the city sparkled with festive lights, laughter echoed in the streets, and families gathered around warm dinners, exchanging gifts and love. Yet, in the top floor of a tall, shining building, the CEO of a powerful company sat alone in his office. The glow of his desk lamp fell over a pile of papers, untouched for hours. He had all the success one could dream of: wealth, luxury, power. But his heart carried a weight no money could lift. For years he had buried himself in work, chasing numbers and profits, while slowly losing touch with the simple joys of life. That night, as he stared out at the city, he felt emptier than ever. The loneliness pressed in on him like the cold night air, reminding him that all the achievements in the world meant little without someone to share them with. He thought about how he used to love Christmas when he was younger, the laughter of family, the smell of his mother's cooking, the sound of carols floating through the streets. It had always been a night of joy, but those days were long gone. He had distanced himself from everyone, even his family. Friends had grown apart. His work had consumed his soul, and now here he was, on Christmas Eve, sitting in silence with nothing but regret for company. He leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself, "What's the point of it all?" His heart felt heavy, and for the first time in years he wondered if he had lost not just people, but also the reason to keep going. Suddenly, there was a soft knock at his office door. At first, he thought he imagined it. Who would be visiting him at this hour on Christmas Eve? The knock came again, gentle but persistent. Slowly, he stood up and walked to the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to see a small boy, dressed in worn-out clothes, his cheeks red from the cold. The boy looked no older than 10. His shoes were torn, his hands trembling from the winter chill. The CEO frowned in confusion. "What are you doing here, son? Do you need something?" he asked, his voice carrying both surprise and concern. The boy didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He handed it to the CEO with a shy smile, then stepped back as if unsure whether he should stay or run away. The CEO carefully unfolded the note. The words written in shaky handwriting made his breath catch. It said simply, "Don't give up." The CEO stood frozen. He read the words again and again, his eyes stinging. He had been drowning in despair, ready to give in to hopelessness, and here was a boy he had never met before, offering him the very message his soul desperately needed. He looked up, but the boy had already started walking away, his small figure disappearing into the night. The CEO rushed out to follow, but by the time he reached the street, the child was gone, lost among the shadows and lights of the city. He clutched the note tightly in his hand, his heart pounding. Those simple words were like a spark in the darkness, reminding him that even when everything feels lost, there is always hope. He went back to his office and sat down, staring at the paper with tears rolling down his cheeks. He realized then that kindness has no measure of wealth or power. That boy had nothing to give but a few words, and yet those words had more value than anything money could buy. They had given him strength again. For hours he sat in silence, reflecting on his life. He thought about how many people, just like that boy, were struggling silently. How many children had no warm home to sleep in, no gifts under the tree, no family to laugh with. And yet, even in his poverty, that boy had given away something precious: hope. The CEO realized he had been blind to the true meaning of life. Success was not about bigger deals, taller buildings, or overflowing bank accounts. It was about lifting others, about sharing compassion, about making sure no one felt as invisible as he had felt that night. The next morning, instead of staying hidden in his office, the CEO stepped outside into the city. He went to the neighborhoods he had once ignored, the places where children ran barefoot and families struggled to eat. He searched for the boy, asking people if they had seen a child with kind eyes and torn shoes. He couldn't find him, but in his search, he found something else, a new purpose. He saw families who needed food, children who needed education, and elders who needed care. For the first time in years, his heart felt alive, beating with a reason bigger than himself. In the months that followed, he began using his wealth differently. He funded shelters, schools, and food programs. He sat with children, played with them, and listened to their stories. He talked with the old, held their hands, and gave them warmth in their loneliness. Each act of kindness reminded him of that night, of that boy who had handed him a piece of paper and unknowingly saved him from despair. And though he never saw the boy again, he kept the note on his desk, framed carefully. Whenever he felt tired, discouraged, or overwhelmed, he would look at those 4 words, "Don't give up," and remember the power of a simple act of kindness. It reminded him that even the smallest gesture could change a life, even if you never know whose life it might touch. Over the years, people admired him not just as a successful CEO, but as a man with a generous heart. They said he had transformed, that he no longer carried the coldness of a businessman, but the warmth of a father, a friend, a helper. What they didn't know was that it all began with a poor boy and a crumpled note on a lonely Christmas Eve. The story of that night stayed with him forever, and whenever someone asked him what turned his life around, he would smile gently and say, "It wasn't money, it wasn't success, it wasn't power. It was kindness, pure and simple. A child's kindness reminded me that even when you have nothing, you can give hope. And hope is enough to save a life, because even the smallest act of kindness, like a few heartfelt words, can completely change someone's life." In the heart of the city, towering glass buildings stood proud, their windows glowing against the dark winter night. Inside one of those buildings, at the very top floor, a CEO sat alone on Christmas Eve. His office was grand, lined with polished wood, expensive artwork, and shelves filled with awards that celebrated his achievements. Yet despite all the signs of success, he felt nothing but emptiness. The silence around him was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the twinkling lights in the distance, and whispered to himself, "Is this all there is?" He had spent his whole life chasing wealth, working day and night to build an empire. Every year, the profits grew, and so did his reputation. People admired him, envied him, and even feared him. But what no one saw was the loneliness that crept into his life. He had lost touch with his family, drifted away from friends, and forgotten the warmth of human connection. He had everything money could buy, but not the one thing his heart longed for: peace. That night, his loneliness felt sharper than ever. Christmas used to be a season of joy for him when he was a child, family gatherings, carols, laughter, and warmth. But now, Christmas was just another night, empty and cold. He rubbed his tired eyes, thinking about how hollow his life had become. The thought crossed his mind that maybe he had built his fortune on the wrong foundation. Maybe success had taken more from him than it had given. Just then, a soft knock at his office door startled him. He frowned, wondering who could possibly be there so late on Christmas Eve. Slowly, he got up and opened the door. Standing there was a small boy, no older than 10. His clothes were ragged, his shoes torn, and his little hand shivered in the cold. The boy looked up at the CEO with timid eyes and said nothing. Instead, he held out a crumpled piece of paper. The CEO hesitated before taking it. As he unfolded the note, his eyes scanned the shaky handwriting, "Don't give up." He froze, his chest tightening as though someone had reached into his heart and pulled out the words he needed most. He looked back at the boy, but before he could speak, the child gave him a faint smile and hurried down the hallway, disappearing into the night. The CEO stood there, clutching the note in his hand. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered the words aloud, "Don't give up." For years, he had been drowning in emptiness, thinking his life had no meaning beyond work and money. But those simple words, given by a child who had nothing, struck deeper than all his wealth combined. He went back to his desk, sat down, and stared At the note again and again, the irony hit him hard. A boy with so little had given him the greatest gift he could ever receive. Hope. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the boy. Why had he chosen to come to his office? How did he know what he needed to hear? And where did he go? Afterward, the CEO realized that it didn't matter if he never found the boy again. What mattered was the message. He had spent his life believing that money was wealth, that success was happiness. But now he understood that true wealth wasn't in possessions or power. It was in giving, in compassion. In helping others find light in their darkest moments. The next morning, instead of staying hidden in his luxurious office, the CEO walked into the city streets. For the first time in years, he looked closely at the faces of people around him. He saw the exhaustion of workers, the worry of parents, and the hunger of children. His heart ached as he realized how blind he had been all along. With all his money, he could have made a difference. He could have brought joy, comfort, and hope to so many lives. That boy had reminded him of what truly mattered. From that day on, the CEO life began to change. He used his wealth to fund shelters for the homeless, schools for underprivileged children, and clinics for those who couldn't afford care. But more than that, he gave his time. He visited those places, sat with people, listened to their stories, and shared in their struggles. And every time he saw someone's face light up with hope, he felt a peace he had never known before. Years passed, and people started to notice the change in him. He was no longer just a powerful businessman. He became known as a man of compassion, someone who used his position to lift others rather than just himself. His employees admired him not because of his wealth, but because of his kindness. Communities respected him not for his company, but for his heart. And on his desk, framed in glass, remained that crumpled note with 4 simple words: "Don't give up." Whenever life grew heavy, whenever doubts crept in, he would look at it and remember that night on Christmas Eve when a poor boy reminded him what true wealth was. He never found the boy again, but in many ways the boy was always with him. Every act of kindness, every life he touched, every heart he lifted carried the boy's message forward. The CEO finally understood that wealth without compassion was emptiness, but a life lived in service to others was the richest life of all. And so, his story became proof that true wealth is not found in money or success, but in giving hope and compassion to others. A single act of kindness, no matter how small, can transform a life, even the life of someone who seems to have everything. Because in the end, it's not what we have that defines us, but what we give. Thank you for watching this story. We hope it touched your heart and reminded you that true wealth is found in kindness and compassion. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring kindness stories. Your support helps us spread hope to the world. See you in the next story.